What is the right attitude towards making mistakes in communication? Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, specialized in communication psychology in international, intercultural, and multi-language contexts. Of course, we don't like mistakes. We have our own experience in our families, in our school education, and typically mistakes are something that is punished, or the absence of mistakes is rewarded. So it's not surprising that we don't like mistakes as adults. I'm not telling you that you should love mistakes, that it's good to make mistakes. Of course not. However, we should adopt a more realistic approach. We should realize that we are constantly making mistakes while communicating, and that it's almost impossible to avoid making mistakes. I'll show you why immediately. So the focus should not be on how to not make mistakes, but should be how to detect a mistake, how to react to it, and if necessary, how to avoid similar mistakes in the future. Now, when asking people who are not too deep into psychology, how often do you make communication mistakes? And lots of people say, well, I almost never make mistakes. Or they focus on some kind of outward criteria, like I called somebody by the wrong name, or I forgot to say something. But typically people would say that I rarely make mistakes when communicating, especially in my native language. Now, if you remember, in communication psychology, we have this communication square model developed by German professor Friedemann Schulz von Thun, that is, every communicative act, as soon as we open our mouth, consists of 4 messages sent in parallel, like the 4 sides of a square. So we send them at the same time, and it's not the words, but it's the entire ensemble between words, our gestures, the situation, and so on. So when we say something, we send official information, the objective facts. We disclose something about ourselves, whether we want it or not, by our accent, by our tone, by our body language. Then we also say something about the other person and about our relationship. And 4, we express what we want. And all those 4 sides can be stated explicitly, directly, or implicitly. So even if you don't tell somebody what you want from him or her, the other person will hear or interpret what your intentions for the situations are. Now, the receiver has 4 ears to perceive your message. The objective ear for factual information, the self-disclosure ear for who you are, the relationship ear, and the appeal ear. So what does the other person want? Now, if we look at this, we see that there are lots of potential mistakes we could make and that we actually make. Now, add to this a criteria for good communication, which is congruence or coherence. That is, on the one hand, the congruence between what you really feel and what you communicate. Is it compatible? And the congruence between what you're saying and the situation. Is it adequate towards the situation? Now, you can make lots of mistakes, and we can make different types of mistakes. You can make mistakes of omission or commission. That is, you communicate less than necessary or more than necessary. And if you analyze it like this, you see that you are constantly making mistakes, because good communication is a flexible adaptation process to your inner world and the situation, that is the other person, the context you are in. And this is also dynamic. It depends how the communication is progressing. Sometimes there are shifts in the other person, you need to adapt to them. So it's a flexible process of adaptation. So you will always make mistakes, because not making mistakes would be that what you are communicating is perfectly adapted to both your inner world and the other person, which often you don't know. So you cannot look into his or her head. So there's always a mismatch on those four sides of the communication square. Now, the better thing to do would be to say, well, realizing this, I'm aware I'm probably miscommunicating all the time, is to be more vigilant for your own mistakes. Because if you consider making mistakes as something wrong, what happen will be you will try, or you will ignore most of your mistakes, because it will make you feel bad. So typically people who are miscommunicating, they are not aware of that. So becoming more aware of this gives you the chance to clarify with the other person, to ask like meta communicative questions. Maybe you understood me like this, so check if the other person has understood your intentions correctly, and then you say sorry and you correct. So it's a constant process of monitoring, observing mistakes, analyzing what went wrong, and correcting. So if you have that attitude, which Michael Frese, Professor Michael Frese calls an error management perspective, then actually you are always more adaptable in your communication, and you use all your mistakes as feedback, as data, how to adapt your course. Like when you're flying an airplane, you always need to make small corrections. Like this you need to do in a conversation too. Now, if you want me to come to a company, or do it online of course, and give us a presentation about communication psychology, please contact me. I'm happy to oblige. See you in the next lesson and podcast. Bye bye.